Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is Rabbi Marcus Rubenstein from Temple Sinai. The greatest darkness a human being has to deal with in life is death. The feeling of despair and loss when grieving for a loved one is traumatic and intense, to say the least. All of us will deal with the loss of a loved one at some point, whether it be a spouse, parent, child, or friend. It is not just actual death of a loved one that we deal with. We also deal with small pieces of death within our life. Death of a certain life experience, death of a period of life, death of a dream, death of a relationship, death of a concept, death of a business, and so on. We are constantly confronting and dealing with physical and psychological death. A surprising question might be why? Why does so much pain and grief come from missing the person who has been lost? Of course, missing someone can be very sad, but what specifically creates the vast darkness that one feels when grieving? If we can continue to be who we are after the loss of another, for we are at least still physically alive, then why can't we continue living our life in peace? What is the source of the feeling that we just can't go on living without this other person? In another realm of life, a healthy relationship, either when living in a healthy relationship, either with a spouse, parent, child, or friend, comes many different obligations. There are times when we become irritated at our loved ones or frustrated with the obligations that we feel our life is buried in. Caring for another in one's life creates obligations on oneself. One has to take time out of their own life to actually do for another. Many of us have moments in our life when we dream of leaving our lives behind. Who hasn't dreamed of what it would be like to start anew, to go back to high school or college when everything was fresh, to be independent once again, to release oneself from one's burdensome personal obligations? Whichever place human beings find themselves, even human beings in healthy places in relationships, feel the grass is always greener. Maybe if I took a different path, I would be even happier. Why does this happen? Why do those in healthy places leave behind their good lives to seek something better? Why do we often chase the green grass of the new? An answer to all of these questions is found within our Parshat. The infamous greatest mystery of the Torah is found within it. The mystery of the ashes of the red heifer. The beginning of our Parsha, Chukat, asks the question, how does one purify oneself from contact with a dead body? The answer is given that one must find the elusive, completely red heifer or cow. Another person must then sacrifice the red heifer, burn it, take its burnt ashes, and mix it into water. The ash water solution is then given to the impure person who has had contact with the dead body to immerse in. Once the impure person immerses themselves in this mysterious solution, they are pure. We are then told that the originally pure person who sacrifices the heifer and prepares the solution for the impure person then actually becomes impure because of his preparation of this water ash solution. Two questions must then be asked. One, why does one need the ashes of a red cow in order to purify oneself from contact with a dead body? Two, why does the ash water solution purify the impure but make impure the pure? In order to answer these perplexing questions, we can look to Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Bar Yitzchaki, the most important commentator of the Torah. Rashi actually gives the reason why a cow needs to be used for this purification. He writes, why this rite was performed with a cow may be exemplified by a parable. It may be compared to the case of a handmaid's child that defiled the king's palace. They said, let the mother come and wipe up the excrement. Similarly here, since they became defiled by a calf, let its mother, a cow, come and atone for the calf. This is Rashi on Numbers 19:22. One of the greatest sins of the Jewish people was the construction and worship of the golden calf while they waited for Moses to come down from Mount Sinai. Moses had been away for a long time, and the people were beginning to become scared in the darkness of the unknown. In reaction to this darkness, fear, and mystery, they tried to run back to their previous lives, a life of idolatry, by building a golden calf. Rashi then connects the purification ritual of the ashes of the red heifer to this worship of the golden calf at the foot of Mount Sinai. The Israelites would sacrifice a red heifer, female mother cow, in order to purify themselves from the worship of the golden calf, a baby cow. Of course, you might ask, what is the connection between purification from death and the worship of the golden calf? Right? Purification from worshiping the golden calf. The Israelites responding to loss, death, and fear. They felt lost without Moses and without their old home, Egypt. They were journeying towards the absolute unknown, to a place they didn't know. They were living in a frightening and dark wilderness. Their reaction to this darkness was to chase and try to bring back what they had before in Egypt, idolatry. What they should have done at that moment is wait longer, even though that place was dark, mysterious, and uncomfortable. They should have girded themselves with courage to wade into the unknown, with God's promise that they would eventually make it to the land of Israel, even though they couldn't envision what that would actually be. The sin was the chasing of old, dead visions, the fear of mystery, and the idolatry of old certainties. So too, the person in contact with death is tasked with building their own lives anew. The person who is grieving for a loved one is immediately thrown into the darkness of mystery of the unknown. It is not only that a person misses the person that is lost, but they actually feel the emptiness of loss of their own self. Many of us don't realize that when we are in healthy relationships, our own selves actually transform. Being in a healthy relationship means becoming a healthy new joined self with the other person. When we lose this person, we actually feel a loss of ourselves. We feel like a limb is missing because we are all of a sudden confronting the reality that ourselves were actually merged with that person all along. The grieving, surviving partner must then grieve over the loss of that part of themselves. Eventually, in that darkness and mystery, they must work to recreate themselves anew. Knowing that since God is infinite and dynamic, so too is the human being's ability to recreate themselves in dynamic new ways. The process of grieving, loss, darkness, and eventual recreation and renewal is extremely difficult. It is very frightening to say goodbye to a previous self and walk into the confusing, hazy mystery of forming a new self. For one cannot see their new life clearly until one is actually living it. Unfortunately, many who are grieving just become lost in that darkness, always futilely searching for their past selves. This is exactly what the Israelites were doing when they were constructed and worshipped the golden calf. Instead, a grieving person must eventually say goodbye, sacrifice what has come before, to walk and wade through the mystery and darkness, with the promise they will eventually reach the land of Israel, a new life and new experiences that they could not envision before. The immersion in the ashes of the red heifer therefore symbolizes the leaving behind of an old life, to walk and wade through the darkness and mystery to eventually reach the land of Israel of new life and experiences. This, in the end, is the major way in which we can purify ourselves from contact with the dead. The process of immersion in the red heifer is psychologically elusive and difficult. Finding it could be one of the greatest challenges one ever faces, just like searching for the ever-hidden red heifer. On the other hand, someone who is not grieving, who is still in a healthy, vibrant relationship, sometimes dreams of cutting themselves off from all their responsibilities and obligations. They dream of becoming independent, once again, of pressing the restart button in their lives. These people who are pure desire to immerse themselves in the ashes of the red heifer, to wade into mystery, to try to recreate themselves anew. Usually they only desire this because the grass is always greener. They do not actually have gratitude or appreciate that the self they have built for themselves already, that they are proud of, has only come from being in relationship with their loved one, and therefore living with those obligations. They believe an illusion that they can take the proud self that they've built up now outside the context of the relationships that they're in now, as well as the obligations that come with it. This is not possible. We are formed by the relationships that we live in. When we prematurely separate ourselves from those relationships and lives, we become impure by believing that we need recreation when what we have already have is beautiful and integral. The pure becomes impure. The person in a healthy place chases the green grass and throws themselves into the dark unknown. They cut themselves off from their systems of support and relationships that have formed the person they are already proud of, thereby destroying themselves and regressing into darkness. The person living within a healthy relationship, pure one, is tempted by the healing power of recreation they see when someone who has experienced loss, impure one, is able to recreate themselves and become pure. The pure ones only see the joy of recreation, but not the darkness of the mystery that came before it for those who were grieving, thereby destroying themselves and everything they built and become impure when they choose to recreate themselves. On the other hand, the one who is grieving from the loss of a loved one, impure one, can also be tempted by the security of someone who is living with healthy relationship, pure one. The grieving one might believe that if they only cling to the past, what was, they can resurrect it and be what they once were. It is known that this is impossible, as I said above, for their loved one has passed away, and they have lost that part of themselves permanently. The grieving person, over a period of time, must go through the painful process of saying goodbye to their past selves to recreate themselves anew. They must not be tempted by the illusion that they actually might be able to still live their past life. We experience this both personally and nationally as a community. As I spoke about before, death is not just found in the physical, meaning by the loss of an actual person, but we also grieve over the death of a certain life experience, death of a period of life, death of a dream, death of a relationship, death of a concept, death of a business, and so on. In these cases, we must also immerse ourselves in the ashes of red heifer of renewal and recreation by walking into the darkness and unknown towards the creation of a new self. It can also be true, on the other hand, that there are parts of ourselves that are actually alive at the same time, that we must work to be grateful for and not take for granted, that we actually must celebrate. It is absolutely integral that a person takes on the spiritual work of recognizing which parts of themselves are dead and which parts of themselves are very much alive, so they can understand which parts of themselves need to be immersed in the ashes of the red heifer and which parts need to be kept far away from it. We also experience this in community and nationally. July 4th is tomorrow, the day in which we celebrate this beautiful country. Some of us may find that this time is very difficult right now, for we are grieving for all the death that surrounds us, whether that be repercussions of the COVID-19 pandemic, police brutality of people of color because of systematic racism, or even the punishing inhumanity of living in the Trump era. For all these things, we must work to walk into the darkness of mystery and work to overcome these issues, toiling to recreate ourselves anew, thereby immersing ourselves in the ashes of the red heifer, which will eventually, with God's help, build the just land of Israel in our country. That being said, July 4th is also a time to recognize the parts of America that are healthy and beautiful that we must not leave behind. That being our values, Constitution, Declaration of Independence, freedom, and much, much more. We must celebrate and have gratitude for these parts of America, recognizing clearly that if we leave America behind, we will also leave these things behind as well. May the Eternal give us the discernment to recognize which parts of ourselves are dead and which alive. May God give us the bravery to wade into the darkness, to find new light in the place of what has died, but also give us the courage to treasure and have gratitude for the gifts that we have already received. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.